been trying to find the right words for this over the last couple of days, but I haven't really figured it out yet, so here's going to be my best attempt. This time 2 years ago, I just won my second RDA National Vaulting Champion title. I was loving the sport and had the time of my life performing my routine, which, accompanied by the lyrics of Disney's Almost There, charted my experiences so far as I went from full-time wheelchair user to being able to stand up tall on a moving horse. Beyond RDA vaulting, I was competing at a higher level in British Equestrian Vaulting, BEV, and later that year I'd win the English and British Championships with canter compulsories as well as a walk freestyle. However, I was frustrated at the lack of opportunities for other RDA participants I knew to get involved in vaulting. There was still an interest in taking part, but there was also a constant stream of obstacles. By this point I was already helping with some of the younger vaulters, and I started to think that coaching might be a good idea for me, especially since I was due to have an operation on my shoulder following a vaulting injury, and I was faced with the prospect of no training or competing for 6 months. Vaulting continued to be promised for the RDA group, but every time the expected date came round, it was delayed again. Eventually, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I contacted an experienced vaulting group with coaches who could mentor me, and in February half term, my mum drove me the 200 miles to their yard in Shropshire. I could have gone on my own really, but I managed to get a concussion the day before. Visiting an RDA vaulting group was amazing. I picked up loads of new ideas and found it really helpful to realise that other people face the same challenges as me, both as a vaulter and as a coach. A couple of months later, I started volunteering at a BEV group, other than my own one, to gain a BEV coaching qualification. This was quite an undertaking for various reasons, but has proved to be a very good move, providing me with more opportunities to train and to learn as well as to teach. I couldn't wait to get going with the RDA coaching, but there were more snags. I didn't have a barrel or anywhere to train. We were then helped by 2 pieces of good luck, or rather 1 piece of good luck and 1 massive piece of bad luck. The good bit was that I found someone who not only was making barrels but was also fairly local. It was about a 110-mile round trip and could produce one for me that was both affordable and, crucially for RDA purposes, could be dismantled so I could fit it in a car to transport to training sessions. The bad luck was that all of our horses were struck down. 1 had to be put to sleep, 2 had to be retired, 1 was very poorly and faced a long convalescence, 1 was lame, and that was it. We had no horses. How does an RDA group run without horses? Well, it was difficult and upsetting for everybody. The only silver lining was that it gave a chance to bring my newly acquired vaulting barrel into action. With a few volunteers introduced to the basics, vaulting became an option for everyone, and it wasn't long before we'd had a fair few surprises. Cody was one. Despite a serious amount of metalwork in her spine, she is basically bionic. She was fabulous pretty much from the off, and surpassed all our expectations within her very first session. Emily, who'd done a little vaulting before, could remember it all really well, and quickly learned new skills. And Kate, who waited quite a while to confess her new hobby to her physio, was astonished by her own progress. In December, there was another step forwards. I went to see a horse with my friend and RDA volunteer Helen. We tried the horse on one of the nastiest evenings of the winter, but she was great. I hopped on and immediately just felt safe. She seemed to have a good temperament and wasn't fazed by anything we threw at her, so I arranged to buy her. Unfortunately, after just a couple of weeks, there were problems. Long story short, she had to go back. She was eventually resold, and as far as I'm aware, is doing very well in her new home with no problems at all. I lost £1,000, but it could have been worse. The winter wasn't great for a number of reasons. The trouble with the horse was one, as was having surgery on my shoulder, which then had various completely unexpected and very unwelcome complications. I was also struggling with a more political side of vaulting. It was a really low point, and I sort of contemplated just giving up. I was fed up of having to fight all the time, because when you're fighting a disability, you aren't just fighting your medical status, but also your social status, and it's exhausting. So I was really, really struggling. I had lost basically all enjoyment of the sport for myself, but helping others to enjoy it made me happy. Knowing that there were good people involved in vaulting who made me feel good gave me the impetus to keep going and keep fighting. Ultimately, it came down to whether I was going to let the negative actions of others beat me, where years and years of illness hadn't. I'd beaten things that should have killed me. I'll be damned if I let stupid things beat me instead. By this time, the RDA group had managed to find some horses, and the one who was very poorly had recovered. We were riding again! This was great news, of course, but it meant the end of our Thursday afternoon vaulting sessions. Fortunately, though, the spark had been lit, and we found a way. In the summer of 2018, I'd been on a great course for RDA vaulting coaches at the Diamond Centre in London. I took a lot of things away from the camp, but I think one of the main things was this, that sometimes you just need to make something happen yourself. You can wait for years to get permission to do something, or to have help to do something with the right conditions, but usually the best way to get something done is just to do it, to make it happen. So that's what I did. My keenest vaulters came to Contessa to do some vaulting on the real thing, and we agreed to put a team together. Having spent over a year trying to create the conditions for things to happen, it was really quite exhilarating to be in the position of thinking that, finally, I could start work on the next stage of the project. I'd never written a team freestyle before. I watched hours and hours and hours of videos of vaulting, gymnastics, dance, ice skating, and so on. I read through hundreds of pages of advice on technique, choreography, and artistry, and spent many, many, many hours on the barrel, playing around, seeing what did and didn't work. I fell off more times than I can remember, and spent weeks developing ideas from a nebulous maybe I could to knowing precisely how to arrange every part of my body to pull off a new and tricky move or transition. I chose the music and started figuring out what would work with it in terms of moves. I went through every single note and edited the music so that I'd know precisely where we were at each point. But I did forget that without my hearing aids, I wouldn't be able to hear it well enough for this to help, so that's something to change for next year. I wrote out pages of ideas of pair moves, ways that we could pair people up, and the kinds of moves that they could do together. I arranged team training sessions at my house and at Contessa. After that first session, I wrote out a plan which, more or less, became our final routine. The session also set the tone for pretty much everything we did. It had me, Eden, Kate and Cody, so not quite the full team, but they were all so positive and tried everything I suggested, no matter how ridiculous or difficult it sounded. I was honestly blessed with having the very best people around to be in my team. They all showed such amazing courage, commitment and creativity right from the start, and I'm so grateful for that. Next, we had to think about entries. This was one of the easiest parts, actually, although it was a bit scary pressing send. We also needed costumes, and this was rather harder. Initially, I'd asked people to put aside a little money for cat suits, but then I discovered the RDA group would be getting a donation of £200 from a magazine for whom I wrote a series of articles last year. Our chairman agreed that I could use some of the money to buy costumes for the vaulting team, so we were able to be a bit more ambitious with our plans, although I am actually a bit out of pocket because we haven't actually received the money yet. I had a good idea of what I wanted, but less of an idea of how to create the final items from the raw materials. Fortunately, Cody's mother, another Kate, is a whiz with these things. It's certainly important to be able to delegate tasks, so when she offered to help with sewing, I was delighted. I described what I'd envisaged, and she did not let me down. She created the most amazing costumes that were really practical, comfortable, safe, and effective. She took my rough ideas and made them better with her own ingenuity, and produced fantastic outfits with tremendous skill and alacrity, including sewing up 4 sets of lycra dungarees on a sewing machine in the garden during one of our practices. As it turns out, putting a vaulting team together is a bit like, well, a vaulting team. It requires input from everyone. All of the vaulters in my team contributed ideas which made the routine sparkle. Suggestions and advice came from all sides for all aspects of the final performance. People gave up their time, money and effort to help make our team dream, and dream team, work. The last couple of weeks before the Nationals were full of activity, finishing off our costumes, editing and sending in music for individual competitors as well, arranging the team's schedule for the day, factoring in individual classes in vaulting, dressage and countryside challenge, and a lot of costume changes, finding the right kind of helmets, making team t-shirts for the prize giving, and leg numbers, and of course rehearsing the routine. We had our first and only run through as a full team of 6 vaulters 6 days before the event, but fortunately the work we'd done in smaller groups meant that it hung together nicely. Suddenly, it seemed we were ready. When it came to the day, I could not have been prouder of my team. Everyone in the audience really seemed to enjoy our routine and their run out. I was so proud of the whole team. Every member of the team is vital and brings so much to the group in terms of both competitiveness and friendship. We'd come about through adversity, and we'd done our training in back gardens. Everything, absolutely every aspect of the routine, was done in-house. We made it happen. We were the back garden team that went to the Nationals. Of course, the fairy tale ending would be to say that we won, that the underdogs, coming from nowhere, took home the crown. This isn't a fairy tale. We didn't win, but we did come pretty close. We came second by just 0.1 points, comfortably ahead of the other teams. We were beaten by last year's winners, who were all far more experienced than us and had coaches that weren't trying this out for the first time. They were also very worthy winners. They did an excellent job and always do. So to be scored so closely to them is, for us, really encouraging. We did also win the prize for Best Turned Out, thanks pretty much entirely to K-Tail's amazing work on the costumes. My individuals did well too. Eden won her age group with her freestyle on Stubbs, who she only met for the first time that day. Emily came 7th in her barrel class, achingly close to the rosettes, and Kate H secured a magnificent second place on the barrel in her first ever vaulting competition. So, what can I say about the East of England RDA vaulting team? Well, together with the vaulters I coach at Contessa, and the team does overlap with that a fair bit, I would have to say that they've got me through some of the really tough times this year. When I faced a long time off after my surgery, I knew that I could still use my time productively by planning the team's activities. When I was wondering if, after 6 months dislocated, my rib would ever go back into place and I would ever breathe easily again, the fact that I could use vaulting on the barrel as a barometer of my strength and the team as a goal stopped me from giving up hope. When I felt lost and without support in vaulting, the team stepped in to provide new ambitions. When I was worried sick over what was happening with my horse, whether she was ill or, less important really but still very concerning, whether I'd lose all my money, the team's goals were a welcome and life-saving distraction. When one of my friends from choir died very suddenly, just days after we were discussing the crazy but wonderful world of RDA vaulting and the merits of minion costumes, it was again the enthusiasm and straightforward positivity of my teammates that carried me through that shock. I'm grateful for the friendships. The atmosphere every time we get together is so incredibly positive and makes me feel so joyful. Putting the team together has been a tremendous amount of hard work. I've been working on it for over 18 months now, and there were definitely a lot of setbacks, disappointments, and frustrations along the way. It's been the hardest thing I think I've ever done so far, but also one of the biggest and best things. I cannot begin to tot up all the hours from 18 months of experimentation, research, travel, work to pay off everything else, organisation and administration, and so on. I feel so incredibly fortunate, though, that none of the stress came from my vaulters. They have all been amazing, right from the start. I couldn't have asked for a better bunch of people to work with. They are all phenomenal. The team this year saved me. Stepping out into that arena, or rather being carried into it by Helen giving me a piggyback, with my friends and teammates beside me was one of the proudest moments of my life. The team has given me purpose and pure enjoyment. Our aim always at Hartpury was to entertain. We wanted people to remember us not just because we were amazing, which we obviously are, but also because we made them feel good. I think it's pretty safe to say that we did that. Most importantly to me is something summed up in this one photo. Usually in vaulting competitions, the team look fairly serious, especially when they're waiting for their turn to be on the horse. But there was no stifling the enthusiasm and excitement and sheer joy of our team. This photo for me is what we were all about. Friends, being amazing and loving it.